Okay, welcome back, dudes. This is obviously your favorite Shogun here, Sugi, and today I'm gonna be reviewing Kaiju number 8, and this will be mostly spoiler-free review. First, I wanna break down a bit of the premise of the series and then go into my individual review out of it. So, Kaiju number 8, what exactly is this about? So this takes place on a fictional Japan, which has been now constantly invaded by these things known as kaiju. And humans have essentially formed out what is it called a defense force, which is a militarized organization which is tasked to protect Japan. And our main protagonist, Hibino Kafka, is a 32-year-old man who is basically part of the cleaning crew. So these are the guys that are cleaning the remains of the slaughtered kaiju in the cities, and he's basically there like cutting off their livers and transporting them to different locations and just like general cleanup stuff. And he has long aspired to become part of the defense force, and in the kind of like the pilot episode, new rookie is introduced into this cleanup crew known as Reno, and basically Reno kind of is motivating Kafka to try again to get into the defense force because he has attempted in the past multiple times but always failed. And he now gets into this motivation again to basically try out for the defense force. And he's very old and he's not like supposed to get in anymore because he's right there on, you know, the age limit and everything. And all the other rookies are like 18 or 20, suspectedly. I think that's kind of like alluded there in the context. And essentially he kind of makes it in, but something weird happens where this parasitic kaiju basically enters inside of the body of, you know, Kafka, and he is now basically able to transform into kaiju, and the kaiju known as number 8. And that's kind of where the name comes from, and that's where a lot of the premise revolves around, that he has to hide the fact that he is actually a kaiju. And some people can probably draw in some similarities to other shows, like let's say Attack on Titan, kind of similarity where humans are defending each other against these giant monsters, or like Chrome Shelled Ray just comes into my mind. And there was the insect show on Netflix, I can't remember the name right now, but there has been somewhat similar types of like survival stories where humans are fighting some type of things that are trying to wipe them out. And the premise in that sense is, you know, not new, but I do definitely feel it felt fresh. Like sometimes someone can come in and create a similar story, but it somehow feels a bit different artistically and tone-wise, and, you know, things like that feel, you know, distinctively unique from the rest of the shows. Like, tonally, yes, there are some similarities with Attack on Titan. This is definitely less serious type of a show, but there are people who die, there's blood flowing, and it's a bit different type of a premise. Now, this is a 12-episode series. It has been animated by Production IG, and I have to say that the animation, maybe there's some of the character designs, especially Kafka's design, which is this sort of weird, like, fishneck design. The animation-wise, it felt like the art direction was very close to something what we see on an original anime, which is not based on any manga whatsoever. And you kind of have those types of designs, which like somehow reminded me of that in a lot of ways. So artistically, it did give me a bit of time to get used to, but overall, like, I think the art style is pretty good. Animation is actually pretty decent. In my opinion, they were not overtly reliant on 3D. I think there were definitely some of the kaiju which were 2D drawn, or at least there was some type of effects to make them look like more 2D than actual 3D models. So that's something I definitely liked about this series. Now, in terms of like also what are differentiating factors is that a lot of the, you know, shonen shows essentially tend to have very young protagonists. Now we have kind of like a character who is in his 30s. He's not like high school student or anything like that, which is also refreshing because there are a lot of anime which are kind of stuck into that whole school thing and being extremely young. People have adventures and life on when they're adults, and that's something kind of nice to see, that we're like also acknowledging like it was a 32-year-old person is not elderly, but yeah, a bit more like older people is nice to have as protagonists, and we don't see that too much in the modern day. But I mean, there is an appeal to this character, and definitely a lot of the memes and a lot of the commentary has to do with him being old, but he's still not really giving up. And he's a very much of a, like, this sort of a very motivational aspect of the Defense Force, and you're going to be seeing that throughout the show. Now, there's obviously the kaiju, which are a big part about the premise. And sometimes, I just want to like go in a bit of a side tangent here, is that sometimes you have things like, let's say, Jurassic Park or Attack on Titan. You could make the argument that the main characters are the beasts themselves. Jurassic Park is not exactly about the characters, it's about the dinosaurs. And that can be a major draw point into a series. It's not always the characters. The kaiju themselves in the show are somewhat interesting. I do feel that one of the things that the show maybe lacked was actually going more into detail what exactly the kaiju are, when did they appear in the world, what is the economic, political, socioeconomic situation with the world, because Japan has their own defense force. Are the other countries fighting the kaijus? What exactly is going on there? So there's a lot of questions which are not exactly answered in that sense. Are the kaiju only appearing in Japan? Like, I don't know. The story doesn't exactly do a very good job about explaining those things. Yeah, Kafka will go do some commentary about, okay, this is this kaiju's weakness and this is where their core is. And the core is the thing that you get to destroy and they actually die. Because some of the kaiju like can't regenerate certain parts, so they have to destroy the core. And you have like giant kaijus and then you have small kaijus. But like visually the kaijus don't look like, when people say kaiju, I think about Godzilla immediately. But these kaijus are visually, I think, indifferent from what we have seen before. So I think artistically, the direction is very, very nice. And then obviously there are these villains which are like these humanized kaijus of sorts, which get like a bit explored in the series, but not too much. And I hope that in the latter seasons we get to explore a bit about the setting of the world and like, well, what exactly the kaijus are more in a grander scale. Because right now it seemed that a lot of the story rolled around like, okay, Kafka getting stronger, getting into the defense force, and the defense force fighting against the kaijus. But a lot of that, there's a lot of, unanswered questions here in terms of like world building. And I don't know if that's going to happen or if it's going to, because you have certain shows which don't do much into that and some that do. That's fine, but I generally kind of would like to learn a bit more about the world in this one, because it would give me a better idea like what's going on. And yes, they're like, it kind of also reminds me a bit of like World Trigger. World Trigger was another show that wasn't visually never very impressive or super unique looking in my opinion, but the story was so good and the setting and a lot of the characters and the fights that elevated that show from above. And I think Kaiju 8 has a lot of that potential, and it seems to be fairly popular because there's also a game coming out, which could be fun, don't get me wrong. And apparently there is going to be season 2. I thoroughly understand that the manga has already ended and there's some type of, or maybe it hasn't ended and there's also, at least there's a one spin-off manga out there. But I have to look into more actually on the manga panels and see like how much actually they ended up like, deviating from the actual original art style of Kaiju 08. But I think it's definitely a refreshing entry. It's not exactly like Attack on Titan. It's not like this shonen or that shonen. I think it kind of stands on its own in terms of its feel. The characters are okay, not the most interesting or diverse, but, they all have their kind of own, reasons why they want to be on the Defense Force. There's a couple of characters which kind of get explored, and they have some hidden things on the background which are not exactly, they're alluded into in the story, but you don't know much about them. And I guess those are going to be revealed a lot more going on. But definitely going to be watching season 2. To me, there was, average, solid anime. But I'm hoping to see a bit more about the world building going onwards with this series. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more, and I will be seeing you in the next video. Cheers.